Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Richard Skipper celebrates the best in entertainment. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My show is all about celebrating. There's too much negativity out in the world, but for the next hour, we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate life. We're going to celebrate the arts. We're going to celebrate great artists. We're going to celebrate the baby boomers among all of us. And there are lots to celebrate today. There are three incredible birthdays that I'd like to acknowledge today. Three very good friends of mine, Leslie Ann Warren, Anita Gillette, Julie Newmar, all celebrating birthdays today. And we also have a very good guest tonight. Marc Sotkin is in the wings. Here he is on the screen tonight. He is a writer. He is a director. He is a producer. He is a vlogger. He has been writing since 1976, probably beyond. We're going to find out where it all began, what he's doing with his life since COVID and beyond, and everything in between. Marc, I'm so thrilled that you're here tonight. How have you been? Really, in the middle of this crazy world?
Really pretty good, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing great, all things considered. Every time I turn on the news, I want to scream, but I try to stay away from it all.
It's probably the best advice. It's amazing how both sides of any issue, nobody's happy right now. So it's sort of sad, but we, forge on is what we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Marc, I've been spending a lot of time on your website and doing a little research on you. As I said in my introduction, you're a writer, you're a director, you're a producer, you're an actor, you're a vlogger, you have your own radio program, you have your own YouTube channel. Out of all of the hats that you wear, which is the one that you wear the most comfortably?
I suppose writer, although, I'm a writer who doesn't love to write. I love to read when it's done. I've always, when somebody goes, "Oh, I love to write," it's like, screw you. Because it's a bit of a struggle for me. But if somebody asks me, what do I do? I'm a writer.
Well, I want to ask you, and you just said you don't love to write.
No.
Do you suffer from writer's block? And if so, how do you get through writer's block?
It's not so much block as it is procrastination, which every writer, has to fight through. It's the getting me to sit down and do it. One of the great things about writing for television, especially series television, is the cameras are going to be there on Friday and the actors are going to be there the following Monday to read another script. So and if you've cashed checks, they're going to put you in jail if you haven't got the script written. So I'm kind of a slacker with a sense of responsibility, though. So having deadlines helps me a lot. And since I haven't written television for quite a while, it's, I don't believe the deadlines that I set for myself. And there's nobody who, can put the gun to my head. So that's the hardest part for me, is actually putting the time in to get the writing done.
Now, you probably have already answered this next question for me, but as you look back over your life, has your life unfolded the way that you thought it would, or has it all been a big surprise to you?
I wouldn't say a surprise. But, I did a lot of things before I went to Hollywood. I was, I was 27 before we actually went to LA. So
Mhm.
I did a lot of other stuff. I think it was more a question of having the courage to say, let's pack up the U-Haul and go. At the time that we went to LA, I was actually the BVD underwear salesman living in Houston, Texas, and driving 40,000 miles a year in half of Texas. And I finally said to my wife, I could always get a job that I hate as much as this. Let's go to LA and see what happens. And once I got there, when I used to watch the Tonight Show growing up, and you'd see people on the Tonight Show who knew each other from, the day they got off the bus, and had been friends forever. And that's kind of what happens. When you get to LA, you meet somebody who's been there for 2 days and they have twice the knowledge that you have. So early on, I met people like Garry Shandling, and I got involved with an improv group off the wall. So meeting other artists and other funny people, and you can figure out, pretty early on, may not be the funniest kid in the class, but I'm funnier than most of the kids in the class. So this could work out. So, yeah.
Well, I want to go way back.
Okay.
I want to go back, believe it or not, to when you were 5 years old.
Cool.
Because to me, the 5-year-old self is that time in your life
Yes.
before peer pressure comes on you. Teachers start molding you into what they think you should be or what they think you should not be. What was your life like as a 5-year-old? And are you originally from Texas?
No. BVD sent me there. No, I was born in Paterson, New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a Jersey boy, and third of 3 children. So I was the baby. So kind of, I was the prince, and I've got 3 kids. By the time you get to your 3rd kid, you're done. Really, you figured it out, and there's not a lot of pressure. So I had a pretty, happy childhood. I've always said that, because I loved my mother, loved my father, like my siblings. So comedically, my hands are kind of tied. When you hear most comedy writers talk or comedians talk, they talk about all the struggle they had. I had it pretty good, and I was funny, even as a kid. So my favorite thing was the dinner table. That was performance time for me. So it was a relatively easy childhood. Again, I've always been kind of a slacker. I have. My father used to call me the sloth. I think I was in the 1st grade when a teacher first wrote, if Mark only lived up to his potential. So, yeah, it's always been fairly easy, and I've always been pretty verbal. And so that's how I got through school.
So you were the class clown? Would you call yourself that?
No, because I had no respect for the class clown. I might from time to time, suggest something the class clown might try.
Were you writing for the class clown?
I didn't. Again, not enough respect for the class clown. He wasn't worthy of what I was doing. It's funny. Whoever sat in front of me in class usually got the A material. But if you could make the teacher laugh, it covered a lot of sins in terms of homework not getting done and things like that. So, yeah.
So was it a job that got you to Texas, or was it a family move that got you there?
No, it was a job. I had actually tried to sneak into show business the back door. This was probably 73 or 74. Sony had just come out with their first portable video cameras, Portapacks. They were like a little suitcase that you carried and a camera. And a friend of mine and I bought 2 of them, and we started this thing called Sports Star Productions. And we would go to golf clubs, and when they had their annual tournament, we would shoot everybody off the first tee. And I had made a club with a piece of wood in it, and I would go out on the course and have somebody tell them to miss the ball 3 times and then break the club over their knee, or miss the ball 3 times and then throw it up on the green. And at that time, no one had seen themselves on TV, and we would show that at the banquet at night.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, that business went out of business because there wasn't enough business for us, and I needed a job. And went to, I was in Jersey, and the New York Times, they always had ads how you could get into show business.
Right.
And I went to an agency, and what they told me was, we can get you in, but you're going to be doing ad sales. But we have some people we'd like you to meet, and they sent me to BVD Underwear, who hired me right away, and they sent me to Texas. And I spent 2 years in Texas, again, driving 40,000 miles a year in half of Texas, going to little stores and big stores and trying to convince them that BVD was the way to go underwear-wise. And then at some point it was like, actually, it wasn't just at some point. My wife and I were getting ready to buy a townhouse, and I knew, and we had found one, and we were under contract. And I knew if we bought that, I was an underwear salesman, and that's where I was going to be. And that's when I said, let's go to LA and see what happens.
And was it an easy decision for her? She was like, let's go.
Neither of us were crazy about Texas. And I don't think she was any happier being married to an underwear salesman than I was happy being an underwear salesman. I think she knew that it wasn't working out for me, terribly. So I've been very, very fortunate. I've been married now for 51 years.
Congratulations.
4 different women, but I put in the time. No, the same woman, still married to her. And I've been very fortunate when I've said things like, let's go to LA. We went to LA, and she's my partner.
Mm-hmm. So you get to LA and you start meeting people, you start networking, you start acclimating yourself. How do you get your toe in the door initially?
So my sister lived in LA, and she was not in the entertainment business at the time, but years before, she had been a talent coordinator on the Joey Bishop show. So she did know some people in the business. And she introduced me to a friend who, made a call, and I became a gopher on an Easter Seal telethon. It's a telethon, so it didn't last that long. But through that, I met somebody who wrote questions for the quiz show Tattletales. I don't know if you remember that show.
Oh, of course I do.
Hosted by Bert Convy.
Yes.
And the way they used to work was, it was couples, and they would put the men in a soundproof booth and ask the wives a question, and then they bring the guys out and try to match it. Anyway, if you had a question for the guys, you wrote it on a blue card. And if you had a question for the gals, you wrote it on a pink card. And you had a question that could go either way, was a yellow card. And you'd hand in a pile of cards. And if they used any of them, they would pay you $15 a question. So that was actually the first time I got paid. And at the same time, I started writing spec scripts. For those who don't know what spec script, you pick a show that you like, that's on, that people know the characters, and you write a sample, and you hopefully get somebody to read it. And they rarely buy a spec script, but so I wrote a Rhoda and a Barney Miller, and people were being encouraging that, you can't write this yet, but you're funny enough and you should keep at it. And in the way I was actually discovered, though, is while I was doing that, a friend, Gregory Hoblet, who went on to direct a lot of feature films and a lot of Stephen Bochco stuff. But we were both starting out at the time, and he suggested he knew this woman, Dee Marcus, who was starting an improv show. And I went to that show on opening night, and it was a revelation because it was like people talking to each other in jokes. It was amazing. They had a very good cast. And so I went to the workshop that was attached to the show. And 6 weeks after the show started, one of the cast members decided to become a priest, to go to the seminary, better paying form of show business.
Yes.
And they asked me to join the show. So I joined off the wall, and every Friday and Saturday night, we were doing an improv show. And that was like in September of '75, and somewhere around July or August of '76, a guy named Harvey Miller, who was a writer-producer. He had done The Odd Couple with Gary Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote Private Benjamin. Anyway, he came to the show and asked three of us, me, Chris Thompson, who went on to create Bosom Buddies and a lot of great, brilliantly funny guy, tragically died, has died, and Judy Askins, who was Judy Irvin at that time. He asked the three of us to come be his writing staff on a new show on NBC called Sorota's Court. And that was the beginning of my writing career. And that was 1976.
And then, but how long after that was it that you went into the realm of producing?
So, in sitcom, the way most people, you see people with there's a lot of producing credits. And early on, usually it's a function of negotiation. You want to get those producing credits. And as you move up, one of the reasons to want those credits too is that you get to decide the most important thing, where you're having dinner, and less importantly, I get to decide if my joke is funnier than your joke, and hopefully I'm smart enough to know when your joke is funnier than my joke. So Sorota's Court, staff writer, which was that first show with Harvey Miller, and that got canceled after our first run. I don't remember whether we did 12 or 18. And when that got canceled, it was just when Cindy Williams had the entire writing staff of Laverne and Shirley fired because they weren't writing her character to her pleasure. They only kept Paula Roth, who was great, and also the historian. And since Harvey Miller had worked with Gary Marshall on The Odd Couple, he told Gary, you got to hire these three people. So Chris, Judy, and I all went to Laverne and Shirley together, started as story editors, and on Laverne and Shirley, producers were fired all the time. Okay. It's notorious. It was a hard place to work.
Well, I have a question about that. I mean, I know that there was a lot of nepotism on that particular show.
Yep.
Was that part of the problem?
I think for Cindy, that was part of the problem early on. I mean, she was, Ronnie Howland was a line producer, was Penny's sister. Tony Marshall, Penny's father, and Gary's father was kind of the business end of it. Gary is Penny's brother. So there were a lot of Marshalls. And at the beginning of the show, Penny and Cindy were not crazy about each other. I think that Laverne and Shirley was one of the first shows that the National Enquirer actually covered in terms of all the infighting. So, one of my regrets from Laverne and Shirley is that we all just never recognized that, we did good work. The show was number one. We just had a different way of working. The cast had a lot of input, but you had to lead them down the right road to get them to, Lenny and Squiggy, David and Michael were funny. Penny and Cindy were funny. They were brilliant physical comedians. So, part of our job was to just figure out, let's do a show where they're in a Murphy bed, or let's do a show where they're on a ski. We put them in those places where they're going to be funny and create enough of a framework that they're going to do their brilliance, but we're also funny enough that we're adding to that. And that was both the cast and the writing staffs never came to that agreement, to sit down and have that agreement. So there was always friction. The first time I met Penny and Cindy and David and Michael was like the first day they came into my office, and Chris and Judy were with me, and they threw a script on my desk and said, "Who wrote this shit?" And that's kind of, it was a tough place. But as all these producers, at some point, some of these producers would go, "This week, I'm going to get them to do what we've written." And then they'd be gone. Okay. So during that time, I was moving up from story editor. Then they finally made Chris, Judy, and Paula and I, they made us producers. And then at some point, the producer was fired. I think it was Arthur Silver at the time. And they couldn't find anybody else to take the job because so many other people had been fired. I think they put it on the Valley Green sheet and nobody was answering it. And so they finally offered it to Chris Thompson and I to be the showrunners. So that's how I first became a showrunner. And the first thing I did was sit down with Penny and Cindy and say, well, what would you like to do? And I think it was Cindy who said, I think we should be hypnotized and act like chickens. Boom. It's a great Laverne and Shirley. I just got to figure out who the hypnotist is and when they snap their fingers and somebody says chicken, just when you know. And so they bought in more to what we were presenting them. And also over that time, as we were moving up, I think the whole cast got a lot more confident in those of us who were writing the show. So anyway, that's how the producing happened.
Well, do you think that, I mean, nowadays, I mean, with streaming and all of these other networks and everything, do you think it's as easy to get in? I mean, is it tougher to get into the business?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's tougher. Actually, I don't know because I haven't tried to sell a show in a while. There are so many outlets, and that's great. Okay. However, a lot of these shows, you know, do 8 episodes as a season or 10 or 12 shows. When I was doing it, it was 22 shows was a season. So you could make a living on being on a show. On the flip side of that, though, when I started, Fox didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It was just NBC, ABC, CBS.
Exactly.
But, you know, there was no script writing software. So there were less people going, oh, I can do this. So, you know, when I go on Twitter now and I see people who are talking about writing and their writing experience and how you get seen and, you know, get into pitch to people, it's a completely different process. However, you know, what I've always said, you know, especially in comedy, it's voracious. It's a voracious medium. If you're funny, if you can write a joke, chances are you're going to get discovered.
Mm-hmm.
How you do once you're discovered? Do you get along with other people in the rewrite room? Are you completed, you know, moron who can't get along with people? All those things can affect a career. But if you're funny, they'll find you.
Well, I mean, I look at a show like Laverne and Shirley with all of these issues that were going on behind the scenes, and looking at that time frame and the fact that that kind of energy went on for as long as it did, do you think that that would have gone on for as long as it did in today's market?
No idea. No idea. I mean, it was a different, you know, I don't know anybody who's doing that much physical comedy now.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in terms of the competition, how many times now on streaming do you start a show and watch a couple episodes and then start watching something else and forget that you started watching that other season? Mm-hmm. That happens to me all the time. And styles have changed. There are shows that are good shows that, you know, cover serious issues. Now on Golden Girls, we covered serious issues, but there were a lot more jokes on the page than a lot of the shows that I'm seeing now. And I guess just stylistically things have changed. Although there's still, you know, if you go, and I know you're on social media, there's still a lot of people watching Golden Girls because
mm-hmm. It's on every night.
It holds up,
and I still watch it every night.
We did good work. It was pretty damn funny. So,
no, you did excellent work. It's still very funny.
Yeah. So the point is that certainly stands the test of time. There are still people who watch Laverne and Shirley. I don't think as many as watch the Golden Girls. Just stylistically, it was different.
Does it amaze you that Golden Girls has the holding power that it still has?
Totally, completely. I mean, I'm proud of it, and so many people say, I watched it with my grandmother, or I watched it with my mother. I watched it growing up, and now they're watching it with their daughter. I mean, the age span of people who go to bed watching Golden Girls because it takes the news out of their heads.
Well, I'll tell you very interesting, and you know this, I'm sure, but in the 80s, when this was on Saturday night, every gay bar in New York stopped for the Golden Girls.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it still goes on. There was a gay bar in San Francisco that performed an episode of the Golden Girls once a week. So yeah, I mean, you know what a big hit it is in the gay community.
Yes.
But when I look back and that, you know, what was it, 1990 that we did, or 91 that we did the gay marriage show?
Yes.
How advanced was that?
Absolutely.
We were, you know, we were addressing issues that people were thinking about, and certainly that the gay community was thinking about. So, yes, it is a little surprising that it is still as popular as it is, but it's also incredibly rewarding. The number of times that people have said to me about a particular serious episode that, oh, this changed my life, or, oh, I was, and I've had gay men tell me that they came out to their families or to their grandmother or to their mother or somebody while watching an episode or after watching an episode. I mean, what's better than that?
Do you have a favorite episode?
No. Someone just asked me that on Twitter. Yeah, I really don't. You know, I also probably don't remember all the ones that I wrote. You know, I'm always amazed on all these shows. The fans are aware of such minor details. 'Cause I think it was 2 weeks ago, somebody asked about what the ladies were reading. No idea. Okay, unless it dealt with a specific joke or the storyline or something. So yeah, I don't even remember. It's like I'll watch them and go, "Oh, I worked with Ruby D. I forgot that I worked with Ruby D."
Right.
You know, because so I did half of them. Okay, counting Golden Palace. So the show was on for 8 years, and I did 4 of them. So we did 102 episodes. I don't remember them all. And the quicker answer is, yeah, no, I don't have a favorite.
And I want to ask you, I mean, are you an avid TV watcher now?
I watch it. Yeah, I mean, I watch every night. I'm not crazy. I don't.
Are you a channel surfer?
There's just too much on. What?
Are you a channel surfer?
I'm a review surfer. Okay, I've become more attuned to reviews, and if someone's getting a so-so review, and it's probably not fair, but it's like there's just too much on. I you know, I do like to read a book once in a while. I do like to talk to my wife once in a while. So yeah, it's just too much. So again, if something, and my wife is much better, she'll stick with a series, especially comedy. If it's just not funny enough, I'm sorry. I'm not going to bother.
Well, I want to talk about some of your other projects. I want to talk about Boomer Alley, and how that came about. And, you know, 190 episodes?
109.
109.
Yeah. So, I had moved to Colorado actually while I was doing towards the end of Golden Girls. I just felt it was time to leave. Family-wise, being a showrunner, you're not seeing your kids a whole lot, and I had little kids, and you're not seeing your wife a whole lot, and family life is important to me. Anyway, I had moved to Colorado, and Golden Girls had worked it out that I would go to LA for 6 weeks in May and June, get as many scripts prepared as possible, and then I was only there 2 days a week. I'd fly in Monday morning, be at the reading, stay Tuesday through the first run through, would give my notes, and then I'd go home. And I was still executive producer of the Golden Girls, which was great. But after that, I kept getting worse and worse shows, because who wants a showrunner that's only wants to be there 2 days a week? So at some point, I stopped doing sitcoms. I stopped going to LA. The internet was happening. And I felt there was this audience, this boomer audience, and started thinking about the original concept was to create more content with boomer talent that I knew wasn't getting enough work in LA. We didn't raise enough money with a business plan. So at some point I said, well, what can I do if I didn't have anybody else? And there was a very talented woman in Boulder, Norman McGraw, who, if you've seen any of the Boomer Alley videos, did all the background stuff. And at that time, it was much more difficult to do. There wasn't as much software. And so I started doing them. The very first one I did, actually, Bob Saget was nice enough to be my guest on Celebrity Colonoscopy. And so we were doing issues that, were boomer involved. And I did one a week, and I did 109 of them. And out of that led the radio show, Boomer Alley Radio, that actually Humana Insurance was underwriting that. And it was on KFWB in LA, and a group of stations in Colorado, and it was streamed. So we did that for a couple of years, and it never got to the point where Boomer Alley or Boomer Alley Radio was making enough money to keep all the people who were then working on it. It was a labor of love. We just don't pay the bills. So, so at some point we decided, okay, we've done enough of it. So that was Boomer Alley. And if anyone wants to see those, all those videos are on marcsotkin.com.
Exactly. But I was listening to one of your interviews earlier today, and you were talking about all the noise that's out there. And how, to navigate your way through the noise. And I think you were talking about Jerry Seinfeld and the fact that he is, has a show that is on the internet. Was it Jerry Seinfeld? And, how does one, find their way in today's world?
Well, in Jerry Seinfeld's case, it helps to have the most popular sitcom ever. People know who Jerry Seinfeld is. So I'm going to go look at comedians in cars drinking coffee. I don't know. One of the things I tweeted a few months ago was, can you name 5 people who don't have a podcast? Everybody has a podcast.
That's true.
Everybody has a podcast. How do you break through that noise? How does that happen? So having some celebrities certainly helps. People who started early and went through the hassle of building audience. When I was doing Boomer Alley, I didn't want to do social media. You have to do social media. And so, and this generation knows the stars now are on TikTok.
Well, let's talk about that for just a moment. What aspects of social media have you embraced, and what aspects do you absolutely abhor?
The discourse is certainly abhorrent.
Especially today.
So that's not a real bright light shining on how we're getting along. So not crazy about that. Actually, sorry that I didn't get on Twitter earlier, because when it first happened, it was like, oh, great. So I got to write a joke every damn day, right? To go on. If it ain't funny, I'm not going to put it.
And believe it or not, today is National Tell a Joke Day. Do you have a favorite joke?
You know what? I hear people tell me jokes all the time, and I don't remember them. I have one joke that I remember that is serviceable. two old guys are walking down the street and they see a dog licking his balls, and one guy says to the other, "I wish I could do that," and the other guy says, "Well, I think you have to pet him first." That's it.
Good one.
It's a good joke.
And it works.
It works. That's all I got.
Well, that's all you need.
I didn't tell a joke day, so there we go. I succeeded. Okay.
Yes, you made me laugh. That's good.
It's a good joke.
Yes.
So the rest of the stuff just comes in and goes out, maybe so I can, steal from people without actually knowing I'm stealing from people. So I think, and when I look back at when people are mentioning me on Twitter, it was shortly after Twitter started, because there was a lot of Golden Girls questions, and I might have been able to build an audience at that point. So now I'm just, I am on Twitter. I answer questions from Golden Girls people and Laverne and Shirley people. That's not a huge audience. I have friends who have big audiences, and sometimes I will, reply to something that they tweet. I'm a little more active on Facebook. But
well, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm not asking for names.
Yes.
And I don't want you to give any circumstance that would give anything away. But I want to know, what is the most difficult time that you've ever gone through in this business? And how did you get through it? And I'm only asking this question for anyone who's out there who's watching this, who's going through a difficult time in their own careers. Anything in terms of how you get through the difficult times in this business?
Short answer, faith is the short answer. So the last season of Laverne and Shirley, okay, this is when Cindy was pregnant, and we started the season. And the only reason I had left Laverne and Shirley. I had left Laverne and Shirley to do a pilot called Working Stiffs with Michael Keaton and Jim Belushi. And that didn't go, or we got on CBS, but it didn't last very long, and had other jobs. I got a call from Penny Marshall that Paramount had just hired her to direct her first feature film. She was going to direct The Joy of Sex. A script had been written by the brilliant John Hughes. It was very, very funny, but the story was in trouble. She wanted to hire me to do the rewrite of the movie, but since we needed more time to be together, would I also come back and be the showrunner on that season of Laverne and Shirley? The only problem was, so normally on a show of 22 episodes, you'll shoot 3 or 4 episodes and then shut down for a week. The actors will get to rest. The writers get to catch up on their writing. Okay. Because Penny was getting ready to direct this movie, and because Cindy was pregnant and knew when the baby was due, we were going to shoot all 22 shows in 22 weeks with no breaks. I would only have Penny and Cindy for 18 of those weeks, but they had to be in all 22 episodes. Okay. So that meant I was going to have to shoot some scenes during those 18 weeks where they would go, Lenny and Squiggy were going to Chicago, and Lenny and Squiggy were back from Chicago. Okay. And those episodes would feature the rest of the cast. Because of Cindy's deal, because of her pregnancy, she had to be out. She had on shooting nights. She had an 11 o'clock hard time. Got to get her out of there. There was a hospital bed in backstage so she could rest. Everything was fine. We were shooting, and I think the fans tell me it was the second episode. I thought it was the 6th episode. Somewhere early on, we were shooting the episode. It's like 10:15, and we're doing pickups. The audience is gone. A light goes out, and the lighting guy tells me 10-15 minutes, it'll be back up. And so there's still time to do this pickup. That night, we finished probably at 11:05, 11:07, something like that. I went in the next day and got called into Gary Nardino, who was the president of Paramount Television. I go into his office. He's there. Gary Marshall's there. The president of ABC Television is in there. And they say, "What did you do?" Cindy Williams has quit the show. Now, we still can't shut the show down because Penny's deal is a hard finish. She's got to be done in those 18 weeks. So we had to have a script. So we on Laverne and Shirley, we would start on a Tuesday and shoot, or we shot on Tuesday nights. We would start on, well, the week began on Wednesday. The big rewrite was Friday night. We'd shoot on Tuesday. So this was a Tuesday, and we had to have a script for Wednesday. All the scripts we had were Laverne and Shirley scripts, and now we needed a Laverne script. We somehow got a script written overnight. Terrible episode. If you're a Laverne and Shirley fan, you remember Laverne and the big hats. She wore a big hat that had like Eiffel Tower, and gondola. It was awful, and we just got it done. Okay. Didn't shut down. 1 week, at the time, Penny was seeing an actor named Larry Breeding, who was on a show called Who's Watching the Kids, another Gary Marshall show. And she was seeing him in real life. And he was guesting that week as her boyfriend on Laverne and Shirley. Friday night, we do the big rewrite. We come back Monday morning. Nobody knows where Larry Breeding is, okay? As it turns out, Larry had a horrible car crash that over the weekend. Larry Breeding was dead.
Oh, my God.
Larry Breeding was dead. We still had to, and Penny, what a trooper. We asked Jim Belushi to come in and play the same part, saying the same words that Penny's lover had been saying to her the week before.
Oh, my God.
So it took us because of that, it took us 23 weeks to do the 22 shows. The best producing job I've probably ever done in my life. And when that was over, I couldn't get arrested. Okay. There was a year that I couldn't get work. Wasn't getting work.
Were you blackballed in the industry?
I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why. Like I said, this was an amazing producing job. And so during that, that was stressful. And eventually, Gary, so when you were writing, I didn't do It's Garry Shandling Show. I co-wrote and produced Gary's 2 Showtime specials. His first.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm sorry about that.
This was Garry Shandling Alone in Vegas, and then Garry Shandling's 25th anniversary show.
Well, I will say this, gone all too soon.
Yeah. And we were very close.
Huge fan of his.
Actually, very few people know this. I mentioned it maybe in 1 or 2 other interviews. Gary and I actually did a double act together for a very brief period of time. Gary's middle name was Emmanuel. My middle name is Daniel. And we were Daniel and Emmanuel for a very brief time. And the act was terrible. Fortunately, I got discovered to go write Sorota's Court. And it was Gary, who had a successful writing career at that time. Anyway, he went off to become Garry Shandling. Anyway, Gary had just sold at that point the first special to Showtime and asked me to come write and produce with him. And so the fog was lifted. So that was a difficult period. The other difficult period I had was after I moved to Colorado. I made some stupid ego decisions and got rid of representation that was great representation. And I wasn't a young writer anymore. I was an old writer. And it's well known that old writers aren't in great demand. Show business is a lot like pro sports. You don't necessarily know when you've played your last game. But
I was watching Bill Maher the other night, and he had Steve Martin and Martin Short on.
It was great. And yeah, it was great.
And and Steve Martin was talking. He was one of the writers on the Smothers Brothers, and he was talking about the motto was don't. The old establishment was don't listen to anyone over 30 at that time.
Yes,
and I guess it's still the motto in this business.
Well, and at some point, an agent friend, I called an agent friend, someone who I'd known for a long, long time. and told him my dilemma. And he said, I can't get work for the writers I represent who are in their 50s now. What am I going to tell them if I sign you? So at some point, you got to go, okay, I guess either you're going to want to keep knocking on doors and find someone who's going to open the door, or I started doing Boomer Alley, and I started writing.
Well, do you have a theory about that in this business? What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever really sat down and thought about it?
Yeah, well, actually, there's some thought about it. So when I started, okay, TV was for kids and movies were for adults. Okay, that has flipped. TV is now for adults, and movies are for kids. Movies are now all superhero movies. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure if you're an older writer now in LA, there's so many outlets, there may be a better chance for you working. The other problem is when you're doing a series. So, God, I loved working with Tom Whedon. God bless him. He was great. And he did It's a Living with Me and was on Golden Girls. He's Joss Whedon's father. Okay. Mm-hmm. But Tom was in his 50s when we were doing Golden Girls. And there were nights when, at 11 o'clock or 11:30 at the rewrite table, Tom would doze off. It would happen. Okay. I wouldn't be funny at 1 o'clock in the morning anymore. Sometimes Laverne and Shirley, we were doing all-nighters. That's not going to happen now. That's funny. Gary Marshall used to always hire one older writer. We had a guy named Milt Josephsberg who had written for like Jack Benny.
Oh, yes, I know. Yeah.
Okay. And he was always, on every show, he had one of those guys, but it was sort of just to report back to Gary of what was going on in the room. Because a lot of times Milt would just go, when I was the show, incidentally, Mark, and then he would go and tell some story from 1935. I was like, Milt, we want to go home tonight. Okay. It's a great story, but come on. So there's that. And I get it, Mm-hmm. Also, if you're a young showrunner, depending on your ego, you may not want me in the room. So there's all of that.
Right. And so Colorado, you're home now?
No, actually, about 2.5 years ago, we moved to Santa Fe.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we actually used to come to Santa Fe a lot when we lived in LA, spending weekends here. And we always liked it. And lived in Colorado for 28 years, but the kids were grown, big house, time to downsize, and we were ready for something different. So we said, well, let's see what Santa Fe is all about.
And is there a routine to your life now?
Has this last year been a routine in anybody's life?
For anyone.
Yeah. So, it's been difficult in terms of getting into social circles and meeting people and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, let me ask you this. How has this year, the past year and a half, impacted your life beyond the obvious that we've all gone through? What are some of the things that this past year and a half have taught you about yourself? You are a spiritual person. That have taught about yourself that you will carry through the rest of your life.
It's not happy stuff. Okay. It's like, this could be the new normal. And if it is the new normal, I'm 73. I could wrap it up now. Would it be bad for my wife and my kids? Maybe. They've gotten the best of me. So there's that. I mean, and part of it is age appropriate in terms of dealing with mortality and stuff. But I thought the whole climate change pandemic world that is probably on its way because of there's too many rats in the maze. There's just too many of us on the planet, and that's not going away unless this pandemic is really good. I thought I'd be out before all that happened. That doesn't look like that now. Mm-hmm. So, I've always been an optimist, and I find it challenging under these circumstances to maintain that.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I've got some questions here. These are just some generic questions, just for some fun.
Cool.
Nothing that's directly aimed at you, but
Yes.
just some questions that I put together. And the first question is, what is the biggest bribe that you've ever taken in your life?
The biggest bribe?
Mm-hmm.
Taken, not given. Okay.
Taken.
Biggest bribe I've ever taken. Oh. So the sad thing is, I don't remember one that was worthwhile enough. God damn it! I've never been offered enough money or anything else to sell my soul.
The next question is, what is the biggest bribe you've ever been given?
That I've ever given?
Mm-hmm.
First grade, and I'm not going to give her name, but this girl, if you remember Chunky Chocolate.
Of course.
Bars,
yes.
You know, Arnold Stang, What a Chunk of Chocolate. I gave her a quarter for us to go into the cloakroom and show me her voodoo. Okay. Now today, I'd be in therapy.
Right.
That's probably the biggest bribe or the most important bribe that I've ever paid anybody. So.
And the next question, maybe you've just answered it. I don't know.
Yeah.
What is the one thing that you'd most like to forget?
It's not that. certainly isn't that. You mean forget or redo?
Forget.
Oh, forget. The last episode of The Fugitive? I have no idea.
Okay. What is the single thing in your life that you were least likely ever to forget?
My father spanked me when I was 6 on July 4th because I disobeyed and I wasn't allowed to go to fireworks that night. The important thing is I'm over it, God damn it.
But you still remember it. What's the most cash that you've ever held in your hand at any given time?
In actual real numbers, or just perceiving it as cash?
No, that you really held.
Oh, probably at my bar mitzvah, a couple $100. I don't carry cash because if I have it, I spend it. So it's not like, oh, I had 10 grand in my pocket. No. Okay. An unimpressive amount, unfortunately.
What is the most comforting thing that you have in your home?
Pictures of my kids, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
What one thing would you most like to teach your wife?
To fucking apologize for something, anything. Anything. For once in 51 years, I'm sorry. I was wrong. But I don't think that's going to happen. And, yeah.
What do you think is the biggest myth about life?
It's a cabaret.
The last one.
Yeah.
What do you feel most guilty about in your life?
That quarter that I gave that girl. Because I should be canceled just based on that.
Great. Marc, I've enjoyed this so much. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I know you could have been anywhere else, and the fact that you spent an hour with us means the world to me. So thank you for being here. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates right here on YouTube. Hit the like button if you did indeed like tonight's show. Leave a comment. Tell your friends. I always end every show by telling
Can I do just one quickie?
Yes.
So on marcsotkin.com, I've written 3 novels They're
Well,
there.
I'm not finished. Hold on for 1 second.
Oh, okay.
Hold on for 1 second.
Okay.
I'm not finished. I'm going to say, hold on for a second.
Okay.
So I want to say to everyone out there, I always end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the 7th name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private message, a phone call. And let that person know what they mean to you. Because as a dear friend of mine says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And as a dear friend of mine says, I always say, if you're going to be out in the boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. Now, Mark, the reason I wanted you to wait is because I'm going to leave the screen. And you've got the final word to yourself. Anything you want to say to anyone watching right now about anything that we talked about that you want to build upon, or anything that we didn't talk about that you wish that we had, or just any message that you want to put out to anyone who's watching right now. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you've done. I appreciate you so much. And the platform is all yours.
And how does it end, Richard? Okay. Anyway, if you go to marcsotkin.com, MarcSotkin, because of the pandemic, I just decided to put a lot of stuff on that site for free. So I've written 3 novels. They're all there for download. If you're trying to be a TV writer, I've got scripts. I've got pilot scripts. I've got screenplays. I had written a graphic novel called The Improbables. I wrote that with Tracy Gamble, who was a writer on Golden Girls with me, and Kevin Bapp is the artist. It's all there for free. So there's no catch. Just go download something. I promise you'll laugh, or I'll give you your money back, but it's free. Other than that, this has been fun with Richard. And, if you have questions for me, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Other than that, be safe, be well.